There was an old elm tree alongside Highway 234 in Kuriyama, Hokkaido, that was said to cry whenever anyone attempted to cut it down. When some workers tried to remove it during construction of the highway, the tree appeared to cry every time they cut into it, and numerous workers lost their lives. In the end, they gave up and built the highway around the tree. It was said that the spirits of various prisoners who helped develop the harsh Hokkaido landscape during the early Meiji era, along with various women who had committed suicide, resided in that tree. Attempting to cut it down would bring bad luck and misfortune upon any who tried. Hello, and welcome to Toshiden, exploring Japanese urban legends. I'm your host, Tara A. Devlin, and on this show we'll be looking at different urban legends from Japan, how they came about, and, when possible, the truth behind them. Yes, after a long wait, Toshiden Volume 3 is now available on Amazon, so if you haven't picked it up yet, head on over and grab your copy now. And that, of course, means that Season 3 of the podcast is here as well. This season we'll be looking at another 10 urban legends straight from Japan, carefully selected by myself for your enjoyment. We're not even close to finished yet, so settle in for another season of the terrifying, the bizarre, the hilarious, and often the just plain weird. To kick this season off, we're looking at an interesting urban legend from Hokkaido. This one's called the Weeping Tree. The Weeping Tree is, or was, a real tree alongside Highway 234 in Kuriyama, Yubari District, Hokkaido, right on the edge of the Muroran line. And it had a long history. In 1888, Samurai Izumi Rintaro, a feudal retainer from Sendai, settled in what is now Kuriyama town. The following year, he started the long and difficult process of building highways and railways to connect Kuriyama to other regions of Hokkaido, then a vast expanse of savage wilderness and bitter cold. Of course, nobody wanted to do this type of labour in the harsh climate of Hokkaido, so political prisoners from the nearby Ichikishiri jail were set to work. As with other projects around the island at the time, many of these prisoners died from a combination of the cold, hard labour, and starvation. These bodies were buried underneath a massive tree close to where construction was taking place. This tree was thought to be roughly 300 years old, a massive Japanese elm, and it was that tree that would later become known as the Weeping Tree. Although there was mention of the tree potentially being haunted all the way back in 1916, in a magazine called Ladies' Club, it wasn't until 1932 that these rumours began to spread more fully. Construction was underway to widen the highway near the Muroran line, and once they reached the giant elm, they realised it was in the way. They decided to cut it down, and as one worker said upon it with his saw, he realised the tree was making noises that sounded like human cries. Before long, his saw snapped, and he was unable to continue. Another worker hacked at the tree with his axe, yet the handle broke, and the sharp end ended up in his stomach. He then bled to death. Next, the workers tried attaching ropes around the tree and having some horses pull it down. Yet these ropes snapped, the horses went wild, and the man driving was pinned beneath the wagon. No matter what they tried, the tree seemed to fight back against them, often with deadly results, and so they gave up. Highway construction continued, but this time curving around the tree, and it was at this point that locals started dubbing it the Weeping Tree. Various rumours cropped up trying to explain why this tree seemingly cried whenever people cut it. There was, of course, the idea that it was the spirits of the labourers who were buried beneath it, their souls seeping into the tree over the years and crying out in pain when it too was harmed. It was believed that close to 30 men had been buried beneath the tree, and their mass burial was not carried out with all the care and respect due for the dead, meaning their spirits lingered on. Another rumour suggested that a young woman had hung herself from the tree. This woman was apparently a cook for the labourers who built the nearby road and railway, but these men also repeatedly abused her, and, unable to bear the pain any longer, the woman ran away and hung herself from the giant elm. A psychic from Hokkaido claimed this woman's name was Ueno Kiyoko, but whether that's true or not is anyone's guess. Another story spoke of a young Ainu woman, the native inhabitants of Hokkaido, who fell in love with a Japanese man. They wished to get married, but they suffered discrimination because of their relationship and were thus unable to be together. In despair, the young couple took their own lives by hanging themselves from the tree. Either way, people believed the tree to be haunted after that string of terrifying incidents, as well as numerous accidents around that particular area over the years, perhaps due to the sudden curve of the road to avoid the tree. And in 1954, a typhoon broke the top half of the tree off. The locals were still too scared to attempt to cut the tree down, so they left it, now looking even more terrifying and bizarre than before. In August 1970, the town started to debate once again cutting the tree down so they could further expand the highway. Numerous people feared that interfering with the tree would again bring about more accidents, while others viewed the idea that the tree was cursed as nonsense. On August 22nd, while all of this was going on, a man by the name of Kobayashi, who was already working on the construction project, got drunk with some buddies. They told him they'd give him 15,000 yen, roughly $150, if he cut the tree down. In his drunken state, Kobayashi grabbed his chainsaw, walked over to the tree, and cut it down. The great elm was finally felled. Needless to say, Kobayashi's brash act was met with scorn from all sides. He became so ostracized that he ended up leaving town, but the damage had already been done. The tree was gone. The 300-year-old elm was further cut into smaller pieces for transport and sold for firewood. New rumours began to spread that the families who received this wood were mysteriously falling ill, and in some cases, even dying. Others found themselves suffering from nightmares night after night. Even in death, the weeping tree wouldn't go quietly into the night, it seemed. It was around this time that an occult boom was spreading throughout Japan, with magazines, newspapers, and even television shows all jumping on board and sharing any scary story that they could get their hands on. The weeping tree became one of these, and its story spread nationwide, making it one of the most famous trees in all of Japan. Even though Kobayashi cut the tree down, its stump and roots remained. After all that debate, it was decided not to dig the remains out, but again continue construction around the tree. Traffic accidents also continued around the site, which were still blamed on the now felled tree. Various weekly magazines claimed that a fatal accident that occurred in 1977 had the locals cowering in fear that the curse of the weeping tree was still ongoing, even though it had been cut down. Fearing its wrath, they continued to maintain the area around the decaying stump, and even transplanted a new elm that had been growing nearby. This became known as the second-generation weeping tree, and a small shrine was also built nearby, which you can still see on Google Maps today. There were rumours that Kobayashi, the man who cut down the first weeping tree, died shortly after leaving town. These rumours persisted until 1985, a decade and a half later, when he was found alive and well. He was no longer a construction worker, but rather the manager of a medical treatment centre. Other than being driven out of town, it seemed that cutting the tree down hadn't affected him too badly. These days, little remains of the original weeping tree, but where it once stood, you can now find the second generation weeping tree still going strong, and the small shrine built nearby, commemorating both those who had died on that spot over the years and the loss of the tree itself. Whether any of the stories were true or not, whether the tree really was haunted or not, the weeping tree was, and remains, a large part of Kuriyama's history, and it will no doubt be remembered for a long time to come. And that brings us to the end of this week's episode. You can help support us and get early access to both this show and Kawabana over at our Patreon at patreon.com/TaraADevlin. And if you want even more urban legends, Toshiden Volume 3 is available on Amazon right now, so don't miss out. Thanks guys, and I'll see you again next time for even more Toshiden, exploring Japanese urban legends. Want even more scary stories? Head over to kawabana.net for new translations every week. You can also join our Patreon for exclusive stories you won't find anywhere else. Head over to kawabana.net now.